everybody, welcome to the UFC, to Dana White's Contender Series 2022 contract winner, the former CEF's welterweight, and then a few weeks later, middleweight champ. It is Billy Goff, set to make that debut against the top prospect out of Japan, Yusaku Kinoshita. And Matt, going back and watching the tape for both of these guys, now I'm super locked and in for this one. Because for Billy Goff, it's all offense and very little defense. For Yusaku Kinoshita, the same can be said. And when you watch both of these guys, defensively, the grappling, it's not the best. Offensively, it's really good. So they match up incredibly well together. And I started this off by saying the top prospect, Yusaku Kinoshita, went into his last fight, debut against Adam Fugett. We threw up every red flag that we could. And Kinoshita is able to go out there and land some good shots. But he ends up getting dropped by Fugett. He gets grappled by Fugett, and then it ends with those elbows down against the mat. So for Kinoshita, a guy who trained for the very longest time out of his native Japan, a former Pancrase man, he switched it up, and his last camp was at Killcliff FC. This camp is also at Killcliff FC. So we'll see what things Kinoshita has been able to add to his tool belt, because this week, he just turns 23. So really, really impressive young fighter, as is Billy Goff, who just turned 25 not that long ago. And for Goff, as I said, he ends up on Contender Series. He gets dropped early by Shimon Smatritsky. He has a giant wild comeback, and I counted over 30 punches unanswered in that combo. And that's the crazy part about Billy Goff's game. You go back even to his welterweight title fight against Gary Boletto Jr. with CES. It's the same thing. It's kind of drawn out, and then it's Billy Goff going body head for about a 30-punch combination. He gets the win. His last time out with CES, it was for the middleweight belt. About 28 days later against, it was Dana White's Contender Series vet, Justin Sumter. He gets beaten early in that one, only to rally back in it. He gets dropped early in certain fights. He rallies back, and I listened to an interview that Billy Goff did with Jake Noker of The Scrap just before our pay-per-view card of UFC 292, and Billy Goff had said, for the last 5 fights, including Contender Series, I had a torn meniscus in my left knee, and it didn't feel great, but it was never really an issue. So he ended up tearing his other meniscus, getting ready for the fight against Themba Gorimbo. If you go to his Tapology page, you'll see that Billy Goff was supposed to fight earlier on this year. So he had multiple meniscus tears, and he got double knee surgery. It kept him out of action for a couple of months. He was able to train, or at least coach wrestling in that time off. But Goff, back, looking to be better than ever, taking on Kinoshita in this one. I think it's an awesome fight.
Is Kinoshita going to become Dante Exum, though? That's what I can't get out of my mind, because I was so excited for him to make his debut against Fugett, and I'll be the first one to admit, I got that fight completely wrong. I also said Sean O'Malley was going to be like Damian Lillard and go home without a title, but guess what? Every now and then, you got to raise your hand and take an L. But I didn't like the way he faced adversity in that matchup, and I know he got dropped early, but once Fugett was on top of him landing that ground and pound, there wasn't that second burst out of Kinoshita, and it's not just the fact that he was getting held down, it just... like, there wasn't moving off your back. There wasn't threatening, trying to get your guard back. Like, remember Michael Bisping got taken down by GSP over and over again? He would get his guard back, so it's a much safer position. Then he would respond to his own ground and pound. I'm not saying every fighter needs to do that, but those are the types of things you want to see a fighter work out of and at least have some success in those areas. And I do worry a little bit about, hey, if Billy Goff's the one who starts landing the initial shots, if he doesn't have to be on the receiving end of a big knockdown and then kind of come back into the fight, then what are we going to see out of Kinoshita? Does he have that second level to his game of, okay, I get hurt, and now when the going gets tough, I'm going to get tough as a result? Because we've seen it out of Billy. Like, you've referenced all of his fights. I went back and watched the majority of them too, and it is kind of wild how the majority follow the exact same script. It's he gets hurt, gets clocked, gets dropped, stunned, however you want to call it, and then gets his way back into the fight, which is an admirable thing to be able to show, matchup in, matchup out. But in the same breath, you do also have to worry, okay, if he does get hit by a big shot from a guy like Kinoshita, is he even going to be there to respond afterwards? Because Kinoshita does have absurd power, even though we weren't necessarily able to see it in the last matchup. If you go back and watch his tape on the regional scene, this guy has legitimate pop.
For Kinoshita, I mean, 5 first-round finishes out of 6 total wins. On Dana White's Contender Series, he fought Jose Enrique, who was a big prospect out of Novo União. They signed him back in June. Kid pissed hot. USADA, 2-year suspension. See you later, bud. So for Yusaku in that fight, he's fighting a really tall fighter. Nobody knew if Enrique was going to be 6'3 or 6'5 or whatever the hell he was. But Kinoshita played the long game on the outside. And if you like the Sean O'Malley win over Aljamain Sterling, go back and watch Kinoshita when he took on Jose Enrique, because they were saying, hey, it's just like Conor McGregor. Southpaw, pullback counter, and that's all she wrote. And for Kinoshita, you go back and you watch him on the regional scene. The one loss that he had before the Get fight was one where he completely blitzed his opponent. He drops him with, what was it? It was with a punch. His opponent's down. He lands a soccer kick. Then he grabs the cage and starts stomping the guy's face in. The stomps were legal. The soccer kick was legal. The fence grabs were not. So he ends up losing the fight by disqualification. But you go back and you watch Kinoshita. You could see that he struggled against some of the takedowns, but he was able to get himself out of those bad positions. You even saw fights where he'd drop an opponent. They'd want to try and play jiu-jitsu with him, and he could utilize really good ground and pound in the interim. Go ahead.
I just worry about what happens when he's the one getting dropped and he's the one who has to fight out of the poor position. That's all. Again, when you're the one getting the takedowns and you're showing great grappling from the top spot, how many fighters do we talk about every single week where it's, hey, they have great offensive wrestling and good offensive grappling, but when they're on the receiving end of those exact same techniques, they just don't have the same skills.
So both guys with long plane rides to get over to Singapore. Kinoshita out of Florida for Billy Goff out of Connecticut. You have a look at this one, Matt. Odds are pretty darn close. Kinoshita was a minus 350 against Fugett. He's about a minus 150 at this point. We have a look at the Topology votes. Has everyone sold their stock? We're going to find out. I'm going to say over under 67.5% Kinoshita in this one.
I think it's going to be over.
I think it's going to be over, and it's the opposite. 720 total votes, 73% Goff, 81% by knockout for the 27% that have Kinoshita, 62% by knockout. So the fans think there's going to be a knockout, and the fans have the underdog in this fight in Billy Goff. Who do you have?
I believed in Dante Exum until about a year ago. That man hasn't played in the NBA since about 2019, so it takes me a little while to get off some of these trains. I am going to pick Kinoshita. I do think he showed me enough on the regional scene that, again, if he's able to hit Billy Goff, especially on his way in, it'll accentuate his own power that much more. And I do think he does have enough pop in his shots to go out there and get the win. But again, I can't raise enough red flags after what I saw in the last matchup and by me being so high on him. So I'm not going to sell all of my stock. I do still have him in this matchup, but this can be a great and competitive fight.
Yusaku's an interesting guy with all those first round finishes. Being a young fighter, you're not coupling him in the Raul Rosas Jr. category just yet, but we don't know what the cardio looks like as fights go on. We did see 3 rounds of it against Enrique, and we saw a finish at the end. But what we saw out of Kinoshita on those regional scene fights, other than dropping just about every one of his opponents, was if he's able to drop them, or if he's looking to defend a takedown, he can usually try and sweep. He can grab a front choke. That's a big part of his game, an anaconda or a guillotine. And against a guy like Billy Goff, who he's just there. He's with that lasting power. He continues to pressure forward. The thing where I see Kinoshita shining is the fact that he's a southpaw and he throws a big body kick and a big head kick, and Billy Goff has a low right hand as an orthodox fighter, even though Goff will switch his stances. I'm going to go with Billy Goff in this fight. I think it's a little bit against my better judgment. For me, the more I watched the tape, the more I saw this guy can withstand just about everything and continue to throw with a lot of volume and a lot of power. Kinoshita tends to drop his hands as the fight goes on, and so I like Goff in this one. Matt going with the Japanese super prospect Kinoshita. You let us down below. Let us know who you have. We have some big-time fights on this card, including a rematch of a main event up near the top. Anthony Smith taking on Ryan Spann. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say. Let's get into it.